Hello and welcome to the MTI podcast. This is MTI founder Rob Shaw, and in our podcast we go over interesting articles and links I found online in this past week concerning mountain tactical athletes. I write a weekly blog post called Arete, and all the links that I found, much more than I'm going to discuss today, are found in Arete. And it's just a great curated source of links and stuff that the athletes that we work with may or may not be interested in. Just importantly, what I decide to include in Arete and what I decide to talk about in the podcast are links that I find personally interesting or important, and mostly it's interesting. So you're getting a taste of kind of what I find interesting. And this is podcast for November 7th of 2024. The first link that I found interesting comes from military.com, and it's headlined "The Rise of Soldier Influencers, Army Eyes Policy for Troops with Millions of Online Followers." So this is a story about active duty soldiers in the Army who have TikTok accounts and Instagram accounts and et cetera, who have millions of followers. And I was kind of surprised that the Army doesn't really have a policy for these influencers right now. And what they can post is or what they can't post is at the discretion of their unit commanders. So what I was hoping to see was some kind of guidelines about what they couldn't post, but that's not what came out of this. It seems that the Army is primarily interested in leveraging these individuals to do recruiting or as part of the Army's advertising. Anyway, it was just a little bit interesting that they had a meeting recently with the Army Secretary and a lot of these influencers, and they discussed ways they could work together, which I thought was a little bit interesting. There's a stat in here, I can't remember what it is. I think it's like the Army National Guard site or Instagram account or something only has 73,000 followers. And they mentioned a first sergeant who's in the National Guard. Well, it says the Army's recruiting page on Instagram has just under 73,000 followers. And the Sergeant First Class Tyler Butworth, the National Guard recruiter, and he has more than 2 million followers on Instagram. So it's just interesting to see how now the Army is looking at some of these active duty and I guess National Guard soldiers with Instagram accounts. I've seen some of these accounts online just in my own Instagram feed, which understand I'm a Gen Xer, so I'm not very big on Instagram at all. I did see that some of them were active duty, and I always kind of wondered what if any policy was part of that. I think that with 2 million followers is likely that at least this individual, this Tyler Butterworth, is likely generating pretty good income from his Instagram account, and he's doing that primarily because he's in the Army. So anyway, it's just an interesting, I think, a story, and it'll be as we see these influencers gain more and more influence or followers. I'm curious to see how the Army addresses not only what they can and can't post, but also how perhaps they're generating income from their association with the Army. So that's the first story. The second story comes from the Times of Israel, and Israeli commandos. The headline is Israeli commandos said to nab top Hezbollah naval commander in the northern Lebanon raid. And this really kind of got my interest because if I understand correctly, the Israeli unit is called Arete 13, and it's a commando unit similar to the U.S. Navy SEALs. And they actually did a at-sea raid at this northern Hezbollah town, which is near Tripoli, and captured a Hezbollah commander, someone who may do something about the Hezbollah naval forces. But they went to this town, did a at-sea infill, and nabbed this guy and got away with it. And the story says that they were infilled and exfilled via speedboats, and it implies that they had some German naval support, which is curious to me. I'm sure Israel has its own naval forces. But anyway, it was a pretty daring raid, and they did it. And it's just an interesting story about another commando or another special forces units in the Israeli army. I'm sorry, it's Israeli Navy. So it's their version of the U.S. Navy SEALs successful raid. The third story comes from the Homeland Security Newswire, and the headline is "The American Empire Collapsing." I've come across many of these stories or columns or essays with this idea, and I just wanted to kind of check this one out and see what they had written up. And there were some interesting statistics in this story. The U.S. defense budget is around $880 billion, and it's 37% of all the military spending in the world is just from the U.S. defense budget. The United States has 750 small and large military bases around the world, which is a pretty high number, 750 small and large military bases around the world. I think that we had a story a couple weeks ago, or even last week, where there are around 200,000 troops stationed around the world at formal bases, including like 25,000 in South Korea, 50,000 or so in Japan, and then 150, 180,000 in Europe. One of the what's driving a lot of these stories is, of course, the presidential election, and it's day after election day today, so we know that Trump won the presidential election, but there were stories about what might change in U.S. Foreign policy, given Trump's more isolationist foreign policy viewpoint. And one of the interesting things that this story noted was that despite that viewpoint, the only thing that happened in Trump's first term was a commitment to withdraw from Afghanistan. Of course, that was completed under Biden, but nothing else much changed. And the essay suggests that because of our alliance entanglements and geoeconomics and other issues around the world, especially with the threat of growing influence and power in China, that nothing much will change, which I thought was interesting and insightful. I hadn't considered that before. The story also pointed out that one of the things that critics point to in terms of a declining empire is signs of weakness during crisis, and that this idea was brought up several times before during the Cold War. It was believed that showing weakness in a major crisis would signal a beginning of the end, and that's why the points, the Cold War conflicts or crises they point to, the Berlin airlift, the Cuban Missile Crisis in Vietnam. It seemed that we stood strong, the Berlin airlift and Cuban Missile Crisis, but kind of limped out of Vietnam after it was all said and done. Anyway, it points to this idea that it also pointed to Britain and how Britain's had a slow decline as it in the 1880s, or I'm sorry, in the I guess it would be 1880s, early 1900s, got overextended in terms of its own empire and slowly started restriction, but that still took 2 generations. So just an interesting, I think, story and idea that we hear a lot these days. Who knows if America's in slow decline? Certainly there seems to be given the election of Trump and his positions on foreign policy and foreign entanglements, somewhat of a constriction, expect somewhat of constriction in the U.S. foreign policy. Certainly his election demonstrates that the U.S. electorate likes that idea. We'll see how that manifests itself in terms of policy changes. some more to see on that end. And of course, if it does, it'll influence perhaps U.S. military size and also deployments and entanglements. The fourth story, I thought this is really interesting. The October 7 attack, this would be in Israel in 2023. The October 7 attack, an assessment of the intelligence failings. In the past month or so, I've highlighted stories that pointed to Israeli army and Israeli defense forces successes in their Gaza conflict and in Lebanon. There was the beeper explosions, or how they did that for the Hezbollah. I think they wounded over 2,000 Hezbollah fighters, and their success in military success in Gaza. But forgotten in their recent successes was the incredible intelligence failure that allowed October 7th to happen. And this story kind of goes into that a little bit deeper. October 7th, just to remind you, approximately 1,000 Hamas attackers, went through the northern border there and attacked that village, and resulted in 1,195 Israeli deaths and 251 hostages. And I'm not sure how many of the hostages have been killed or released since then. I don't have those statistics. But it pointed out some of the failures, intelligence failures. One was the wishful thinking on part of the Israeli intelligence services. The idea that they hoped that giving Hamas power and control of governance of Gaza and allowing Qatari and other money to flow into Gaza, that Hamas would be satisfied and not want to strike out, knowing what the Israeli response would be. And of course, didn't play out. That the wishful thinking about that deterrence didn't play out in the last year. This idea that there were overstretched U.S. or Israeli defense or intelligence forces because their work in combating Iran and the other militias. One of the arguments is that they neglected Hamas to focus on Hezbollah. The article suggested that Israel was more focused on Hezbollah to the north than Hamas in the south, and it created this intelligence blind spot. They had thousands of informants in Gaza prior to 2007 when Hamas took over the government. And since that time, there's been a shift, according to this article, in their Gaza, or the Israelis' Gaza intelligence. Since that time, there was a shift from human intelligence to technology, monitoring, communications, etc., and pointed out that this shift again led to another Israeli intelligence blind spot. But there were some signals that the IDF and Israeli intelligence forces missed. There was one female NCO. She was a signal analyst who warned of an invasion. There were some signals or communications intercepts where Hamas active or Hamas members were talking about an invasion drills and taking 250 hostages. She brought that up the change and was summarily dismissed by the uppers as this being too aspirational of Hamas's capabilities. I guess on October 6th, several Israeli SIM cards and cell phones were activated at Hamas or in Gaza. And this was brought to the attention, I guess, at fairly high levels. And the Israeli military leadership, and they didn't act on it. Overall, it seems that there was there's one more. There were some of the Israeli border guards noticed an increase in Hamas military drills. There were some planting explosives near the border. and they were brought up, but that was ignored or not taken as a credible threat. Anyway, there was really no one reason that they can point to for the intelligence failure, and it's kind of like 9/11 where a bunch of smaller signals were missed. Anyway, I thought it was just an interesting story to come up. Haven't heard about this recently, especially in the Israeli press, about the October 7th attack, intelligence failures on the part of the Israeli security. So I thought it'd be interesting to read into this. The next story, those are four stories or articles in military, national security category. The next two or three, I guess, come from first responder, homeland security. The first is the Hawaii Attorney General investigation into the deadly Lahaina fire won't lead to criminal charges. This is in fire engineering. So just to review, about a year ago, there was a small brush fire that was started on Maui, upwind of this town of Lahaina on Maui. It was put out. The fire was started by some downed power lines. There's a combination of natural forces that worked that day. It was really dry. It's the dry side of the island. And there were some incredible winds that were, if I remember right, were hitting the island at that time from an offshore hurricane. And so there's incredible winds, and they knocked down a pole, knocked down a power line. It started a small fire, brush fire. Fire department responded, put it out, thought they had put it out. The fire and the wind rekindled itself, got out of control, and then it ended up burning this almost this entire town down. Another factor was that in terms of response, the people evacuating town, there's like one main road into town, and it was all clogged with parked and escaping vehicles, so emergency services is going to get there. There were some dirt roads that had other access, but they were gated off this private property. And then when the fire did hit the town, a lot of the buildings were, older buildings, older homes made of wood and really close together, like 6 feet apart. So anyway, it's the most deadly, I think, wildfire in American history, or close to it. Definitely this century, or in the last 100 years, 102 people were killed in this wildfire. And after that happened, I know there was some finger pointing going around in terms of how quickly the county of Hawaii, I guess they didn't sound the alarms they have for hurricanes for some reason. I'm not too sure if there was a text notification, but there was some criticism about how the county of Hawaii emergency services responded. And subsequently, there's been several lawsuits versus the power company, county of Hawaii, and state of Hawaii. And recently, Governor of Hawaii announced that there had been a $4 billion settlement to that. I guess that's still in the courts working its way through. But anyway, I guess this case, the criminal investigation by the Hawaii Attorney General is going to result in no charges being filed. I guess that would be, I'm only guessing, but I imagine the Attorney General is looking at the county of Hawaii emergency response and also perhaps the power company. But again, if I recall correctly, there were these kind of incredible winds on that day that were caused by an offshore hurricane, and that definitely attributed to the fire and the tragedy that ensued. The second story is kind of amazing to me. It comes from Police One, and the headline is the New York Police Department is flying additional drones over trains to combat subway surfing after 2 teen deaths in a week. I had never heard of this, but apparently teens in New York or people in New York will get on top of subways and take pictures of themselves or movies of themselves for TikTok and social media. And in this past year, like 6 people have died, 6 people have died this year. So just through November, 6 people have died. 40 people have been arrested for doing this. And again, 2 teens died in this last week. And they're not even teens. In September, an 11-year-old died, falling off one of these trains. In October, a 13-year-old died. I guess this most recent case, two teens were riding a train. One fell off and was killed. The other fell off and was run over by the train and critically injured. So now the police department is, flying drones over the trains, I guess, more frequently. And if they see people surfing, they'll, at the next spot where the train stops, they'll try to arrest them or stop them or talk to them at least. Anyway, just a tragedy. And, of course, the article does blame social media, and because the teens are doing this to kind of film themselves. Tragedy, obviously. Kind of moving on to the mountainside, but still involves some police stuff. This is a story in Outside magazine, which is pretty tragic. The headline is California climbing teacher arrested on rape charges. And this is just published on November 1st. And Jason Christ, 38, has been charged with 9 felonies of rape, sexual battery, and assault from 2019 to October 2023. Outside Magazine interviewed, I think, 3 women who were assaulted by this individual, or allegedly, and I guess it could be upwards of 10, maybe even more women. This individual, this Jason Christ guy, he taught at the Movement Climbing, Yoga, and Fitness gym. I guess this is a fairly big chain of climbing, yoga, and fitness gyms in California, 29 locations. And he had been an employee there for 3 years. He was also an Arcturus Northern California ambassador. So he was a sponsored athlete. And the way the women describe what happened is that he would groom them in the climbing gym. They come to the climbing gym, get some climbing gym instruction. And then after he groomed them, he'd invite them to an outside climbing trip, and that's where the assaults would occur. And tragically, one of the victims said that everyone knew he is creepy. Every one of his, I guess, fellow employees or other male instructors in the gym, but no one told him about it or told the girls about it. I don't know. Anyway, just tragic. And this individual's been arrested. So the next story under the mountain category is a GoPro to slash workforce by 26% amid a challenging year. And this is from Powder Magazine, which is a skiing magazine. And I thought this was just somewhat interesting. I've always kind of personally hoped that the making movies of yourself doing outdoor activities would decline over the years, but I don't know, it has. I thought this might be a story that pointed to that, but apparently the reason GoPro has declining sales is primarily from increased competition from DJI. I think it's a drone company, and they must make a selfie camera or a video camera also, and then Insta360, which is another brand of outdoor extreme sport, I guess, film camera, a movie camera. GoPro, of course, kind of started this, but declining sales / workforce 26%. It's pretty significant. And this is interesting that this seems like GoPro has been on the rocks for a while as a public company. The stock was a high of $80 in 2014. And now it's under $2. They quoted like a $139 at the time of the story. So it's probably down from there. So anyway, just an interesting story on GoPro. The next story in the mountain outside world comes again from Outside Magazine. And it's a new competition for free skiing, and it's called the Natural Selection Ski Competition. Is set to transform free skiing. So the Natural Selection has been a snowboard competition that was started a few years ago by Travis Rice, who's a pro snowboarder and has been a snowboard ski porn or snowboard porn movie star for years. And as I understand it correctly, they'll take a steep slope, and they'll add in there'll be some natural features, but also they'll add in some man-made features, jumps and rails and other stuff. And then the event will have snowboarders ski down the slope and be some type of scored event where they use the combination of the natural and man-made features to do tricks, and they're scored that way. And apparently this is going to come to free skiing. Right now, free skiing, there's a free ski, free ride, a world tour competition, which is similar, but there's no man-made obstacles or features in the free ride world tour. They just use the natural slope, and competitors are graded on how fluidly they ski, how they use features. Now they're doing flips and spins, but they're using natural features. Anyway, this obviously creates a competition or a competing unit, competing organizations, to the Freeride World Tour. My impression of Freeride World Tour is that it has also kind of declined in at least American participation because of so many athletes now just going right to their own YouTube movies to kind of promote themselves. I spoke about this a little bit ago, but in a past podcast. But when I started working with free skiers, the competition, the World Tour, the free ski or free ride World Tour was where they kind of made a name for themselves. But that was soon eclipsed by self-made movies as they set to make their own brands. It'll be interesting to see if this changes it back towards competition, which I think will be healthy for the sport. This is going to start in 2025. And apparently, Travis Rice is trying to expand this not only to skiing, it's already a snowboard competition, but also to mountain biking and surfing. Surfing would be interesting. I don't know how they'll do man-made obstacles for surfing, but we'll see what happens with that. The next story in the mountain outside world is from Gear Junkie, and the headline is REI banning some members from their return program. This is really interesting, I think, and I heard about this years ago with LL Bean, where there were some individuals, or there's always been, I guess, individuals who have abused LL Bean's generous return policy, and the same thing apparently has been happening at REI, and so far, according to the company, this has only affected a few of the REI's membership. According to the story, REI as members has like 24 million members. So to shop at REI, you don't have to be a member to shop at the REI, but if you are a member, it costs like $30 a one-time fee. You get some points towards your purchase. I don't know if there's any other benefits other than that, but it is a co-op. It's not necessarily I don't even know if REI is publicly traded. I don't know. I doubt it is, I guess. But has retail stores across the country, as well as pretty extensive online presence. According to REI, this is going to affect just 0.02% of 24 million users, but 0.02% of 24 million is still a lot of people. It's like 4,800 customers. According to the company, the customers who are going to be banned from returns or exchanges have abused the program in the past. In other words, they return way too much stuff, more than normal, and they'll still be able to shop at the REI, but they'll be banned from exchanges or returns. This is healthy, I think, for that abuse that goes on. Kind of moving on to fitness now, our fitness and health category. This interesting story is in The Manual, which is a website, The Manual. Can a human overtake a horse in a long-distance race? Here's a theory. And I hadn't been aware of this race before, but debate started in 1980, and whether or not a human could beat a horse in a long-distance race. And the first time it happened was in 2004 when a Welsh marathoner, This is happening, I guess, in Great Britain. A 22-mile course over rough terrain. The Welsh marathoner finished first in 2 hours and 5 minutes, beating the horse and rider. So I guess apparently horses are built primarily for sprinting. They got the big butt, and big thighs, and big Achilles, and they're kind of built primarily for sprinting. And the theory here is that, and I'd heard this before, this idea, but that human beings evolved on the savanna of Africa, and one of the ways that our ancestors were able to kill big game there, antelope and such, was by pursuit hunting. And so you would just chase a gazelle, and obviously initially the gazelle would be able to outrun a human, but if the human just goes slow and steady and keep the gazelle up and moving, eventually the gazelle would or the antelope would tuck her out and just kind of lay down, and the human could go up and just spear it right there, close distance. And I interviewed an athlete named Mike Wolf. I mentioned him last week. He's an ultra marathoner, but years ago he's also a big game hunter up there in Montana. There was a story about him doing this. I don't think he succeeded, at least as I saw, but he was going to try to do a pursuit hunt of a pronghorn antelope in the West. The same idea, where he was just going to kind of follow this antelope. And antelope they're called speed goats in Wyoming and other places in the West because they're so fast and they have just incredible eyesight. They're really difficult to bow hunt, for example. But he was going to try this where he would just pursue a buck or a doe antelope and hopefully see if he could get it to kind of just tucker it out and wear it out and then walk up and kill it. I guess according to the story, the reason that people can do this is because primarily of our cooling system, sweating. I guess a horse, if it overheats, it just has to stop. Whereas people have a really efficient, I've heard this before, really efficient cooling system, and I think we're the only species that sweats. And of course, the evaporative cooling, when you sweat, that your sweat evaporates and that cools the body down, gives us that advantage. And then also, we have slow twitch muscle fibers, a big heart, big lungs, and we're built not to go fast and short, but really long and slow. And that allows this type of hunting to occur, and in this case, to beat horses in long distance races. And according to this story, two runners in this race in Great Britain, they beat the horse in 2007. And then recently, a woman won a 50-mile ultra race over a horse. So just a kind of interesting idea of how we evolved and how we can beat bigger, stronger animals in long-distance races. The next article comes from the New York Times, and the headline is "Tired?" ? Here's how to know if you're sleep deprived. And I think that the point here was try to understand the difference between being sleep deprived and just being being drowsy. Let's see. If you're just underslept, you might feel like putting your head down on your desk or work, or find yourself nodding off while watching television at night. You might feel irritable too, but this typically goes away after a night of good sleep you have. An occasional night of poor sleep is not a cause for concern. However, if you're sleep deprived, the need to sleep can be more urgent, and a more prolonged lack of sleep can result in more severe consequences. You might have trouble with concentration and short-term memory, which affects work performance. Persistent irritability could also lead to conflicts in relationships. You might also drift off more frequently or at risky moments, such as when driving. Anyway, I think that was kind of an interesting diagnosis between being having a poor night of sleep and being sleep deprived. Couple medical conditions attributed to sleep deprivation. The most common is sleep apnea. And I've personally been diagnosed with sleep apnea and work now to sleep on my side and not on my back, and insomnia. There's not much here in terms of getting treated for this, but I thought just the distinction between having a poor night's sleep and being sleep deprived was important. And so if you find yourself, nodding off when you're driving frequently, that's a good signal that you're sleep deprived, and probably go see a doctor and see what's going on. The final story actually comes from the Mountain Tactical Institute meeting. I wrote it, and this comes from a mini study that I wrote that we did a few years ago, and the headline is: a mini study, dumbbell strength training maintains to slightly increases 1 rep max barbell strength. So in this mini study, we had several lab rats, and we did a 1RM barbell strength test on the bench press, the bench press, front squat, and hinge lift or deadlift. And then did that pre and post the study period. And then for the rest of the study period, the athletes worked just with dumbbells in those exercises. They did dumbbell front squats, 2 dumbbells, 1 arm dumbbell bench presses, and 1 leg dumbbell hinge lifts. And for the assessment for the dumbbell programming, we did an 8 rep max assessment. So you worked up till 8. You found the weight where you could do 8 reps and no more of the with dumbbells. And in designing this study, the reason I chose 8 reps was one of the challenges for dumbbell training is that unlike a barbell where you can get super heavy, dumbbell loading is sometimes limited by the size of dumbbells you have in the gym, and especially for bigger men. Most gyms, the commercial gyms, have up to maybe 70-pound dumbbells, and for bigger men, it's probably no problem with picking up a pair of 70s and doing a 2-arm dumbbell bench press with them. It's just not that heavy. So by going up to 8 reps, what I was hoping to do was to hopefully get the lab rats not to have to run out of dumbbell sizes. So by going 8 reps, which is going to take more work, and hopefully they'd have to use a lighter weight, and they could do the programming. And then in terms of the 1 arm for the bench press and 1 arm for the hinge lift, again, I think you could probably bench press 2-arm dumbbells, heavier individual dumbbell size than you could 1 arm. And that's definitely the case for 1-arm deadlift and 1-arm hinge lift. So anyway, the programming for the dumbbell programming or the methodology was similar to what we do for Big 24. So I had them do an 8 rep max test, and then the progression was 10 pounds less than their 8 rep max, 8 rep max for a couple sessions, and then 5 pounds less than their 8 rep max for a couple sessions, and then 1 or 2 sessions at their 8 rep max. So I can't remember how many sets per exercise. It's probably 6 sets. So in other words, the first, after they get their 8 rep max for a dumbbell front squat, for example, the first progression would be 6 sets or 6 rounds of 8. Let's say their 8 RM max for dumbbell front squat. Say they got to 100-pound dumbbells, and so their 8 rep max, and so that with your 8 rep max, 100 pounds, and so the first progression, would be 6 sets of 8 dumbbell front squat at 90 pounds. And then after they did that, they would go to 95 pounds and 100 pounds. It's just a similar progression to our Big 24 that I developed years ago. And it's just a really effective strength progression. So going back, what the study found was when we did the barbell strength assessment before working with dumbbells and then the barbell strength assessment after, well, we found that there was an increase overall barbell strength change of like 6%. This is all the exercises together and all the lab rats. But the overall, when we retested, we also retested the 8RM dumbbell strength, and that increased 15%. So because the few number of lab rats that I had in this study, and also the single digit percent increase for barbell 1RM strength, what I kind of conclusion I came to was that training with dumbbells, heavy strength, is a good way to maintain your barbell strength, but not necessarily increase it. In other words, dumbbells can't replace barbells for improving max effort strength. And the reason for that is that you just can't go heavy with dumbbells like you can with barbells. And with dumbbells also, you have to jump up 10 pounds when you jump up in weight, because generally dumbbells are 5-pound differences in increments, whereas a barbell you can increase by 5 pounds by putting on a 2.5 pound plates. So the barbell is, again, by far the most versatile strength training tool in existence, and has been for years. Again, what the study did find is that training with dumbbells gets you stronger training with dumbbells than it does with barbells, which is also what we found over the years, that at some point training the dumbbells stops making you stronger with the barbells and just keeps you making you stronger with dumbbells. So there's some sport, or in this case exercise specificity, to the programming, and this is what we found of all these types of studies that we've done. In other words, for example, another one we found is that rucking makes you better at rucking than just running. So, and running will make you better at running than rucking. It seems like common sense, but you'd be surprised what happens in some of the strength conditioning programming you see out there. Anyway, I just included this write-up in Arete this week, and you can read the study write-up there in Arete. Let's see. Oh, and then finally, under the interesting category, there's a story in Jalopnik, which is, as I understand it, kind of a website that covers the car industry. And the headline is, "Buying used is now the new normal as new car prices rise 21% in 5 years." So the car prices have risen with inflation, just like everything else that we're paying for these days. And the average car price now, let's see, is $48,205. So the new car price, the average new car price now is like $48,000, and the new monthly payment for the average buyers is $767. So the car price is up 21%, and the monthly payment is up 17%. The story says that lifelong new car buyers head to the used section, and that many car buyers are putting off purchasing new vehicles. I have read where the average vehicle on the road these days is like 10 years old. So it's a combination of, I guess, high car prices and more dependable vehicles. This is kind of interesting that sticker shock is increasingly scaring off many would-be buyers. A recent survey by the automotive researcher Edmunds.com found that almost half of American car shoppers expect to pay $35,000 or less for a new car. But then they get into the dealership and they find out it's going to be $50,000. And 73% of consumers are holding off on buying a new car because of the cost. The prices are just shocking people. And 1 in 6 Americans now make a monthly car payment more than $1,000. Again, which is just shocking. Interesting, of course, in terms of the car dealership and what this means for car manufacturers and inflation overall. Okay, that's it for this week's podcast. I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any questions or suggestions, just email me directly, rob@mtntactical.com, and have a good week.